This episode is made possible by purchasing resources through the Creation Science for Kids store.
Welcome to the Creation Science
for Kids
show. It's camp week, and my older co-hosts are far away, and I'm going to science camp at the end of the week, so this episode is a little more relaxed. We'll be sitting down with a book from the library and letting you know how we talk about what the world is telling kids about the history of Earth and living things. Let's get comfy and see what we find out. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart, in the company of the upright, in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of splendor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wondrous works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Psalm 111, verses 1 through 4. This is episode 38 of the podcast where we learn about Jesus, our Creator, and his amazing world. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts Samuel.
Hi.
And Stephen.
Hi.
To follow along with what we're looking at, check out the show notes. creationscience4kids.com/librarybook. All right. We always have a Bible verse. So I tried to think of one where it tells us how we can know what is true. So turn to John 17, verse 17. So it's an easy reference to remember. Stephen, would you read it for us, please?
Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth.
Okay, so that's just a couple of words. What can you tell me when you're looking at the page? What do you see about the way those words were written?
Red.
Yeah, what about red?
Jesus talking.
Right. The people that printed the Bible decided to make it easy for us to tell when Jesus is talking, and they use red ink. So we know this is Jesus talking. This is actually one of my favorite chapters. If you've listened to all the episodes, you'll know I have a lot of favorites, where Jesus is praying. He's praying for his disciples, but he also says very clearly he's praying for all the rest of us who would believe because of what the disciples told. So he's praying for us. So that them there is us. Sanctify is a big word. Do you know what that word means? Have you heard it? No, I didn't understand it when I was a girl. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know what it meant. It means to make it holy, set apart, special for God. So Jesus is saying, God the Father, please make my followers, everyone who believes in me, special to you through what?
Through thy truth.
Thy truth. Truth is very important. You can tell that it's not a lie. And what does it say is the truth, Stephen?
Anything you...
No, what's it say? Jesus tells us. We don't have to guess what truth is. It says...
Thy word. Thy word is truth.
Thy word. So this is talking about God's words. Where can we find out God's words? Do we have to just guess?
No, we can read the Bible.
That's right. So when we read the Bible, we can know what is true and what is just made up. Now we're going to be looking at a book that you borrowed from the library that claims to have truth in it and states things as if it has truth, and we'll see if it matches what the Bible tells us. First of all, what does the Bible tell us about how old the earth is? Does it say God took a long, long time and then finally after billions of years, he started making things?
No.
No. He said he made the heavens and the earth in the beginning. And then how long did it take from the time he made the earth to the time Adam and Eve were living on it?
6 days.
And also when he made animals and plants and people, did he take millions and billions of years to get them from just starting to what they are like today?
No.
No. How did he get them to come alive?
With his breath of life.
That's true for Adam. That'll be in the next podcast. But what did he use for all the animals and plants?
He said the words to make them be alive.
That's right. He said, let there be. And there was. Okay, now, Stephen, you love learning about animals and plants and things. So you borrowed this book. I'm not going to say the name or the author or anything, but it's published by DK. So it's just a general science book, and it's all about life. And it's got wonderful, cool pictures and all kinds of life forms. And it tells us about all cool things, like about the cell, that it's like tiny factories. Every cell in your body is a hive of activity. It has lots of fascinating things in it. But I want to look at what it says about how life began. Now, you saw this picture. What is this a picture of?
The Earth.
Well, did you know that? What did you think it was?
Planet.
A planet. And you wanted to know what planet it was. And it told us that this was the early Earth. Here's what it says. Earth formed about 4.6 billion years ago. In the beginning, it was a hot molten rock. Did they say anything about their guessing and they want it to be that way and they believe it to be that way?
No.
No, they said it did this. It was there. Did the author of this book see it happen?
No.
No. How do they know? Why are they so sure? Do you know?
No. Maybe they didn't believe in the Bible.
Right. Now, that's one of the big things, the science that you get at the library. They have already decided they do not want to let God be the creator. They're going to assume the only thing in the world, in the universe, is stuff we can see and time and space. That's all they want to think about. So, can we see God?
No.
Can we find God by going out in a spaceship far enough?
No.
No. So they've already decided they will not accept anything that says God had to do it that way. And what's interesting is the reason they have that 4.6 billion years, which sounds like they really know, doesn't it?
Yes.
They actually took some meteorites that came and landed, and they studied that rock, and they said, the way the minerals are in here, based on our testing, it looks like if things had continued the same way, that this rock hardened about 4.6 billion years ago. And they figure if the whole solar system was formed at the same time, that meteorite has been floating around since the Earth was a hot lava, like you can see in this picture, that this planet is all melted, except it's starting to get cool on the outside. That's why it's not bright everywhere, and like the sun. They think this is a lava ball that's cooling slowly. That's why they say the Earth is that old, because they studied a rock that landed on us, and they did some tests. So do they really know this?
No.
No, they would like it to be that way. Now, they talk about how life began. Now, here they're a little honest, but still not very. They say life probably began in the oceans. Did life begin in the oceans?
No.
No. What was the first life God created?
Animals.
Nope. Before they created the animals.
The Earth.
Well, he made the sea, but there wasn't anything alive in it. The first living
The
things.
heaven and the earth.
But they're not alive. What's the first thing he made that's alive? That scientists talk about that have living processes. Plants. He made plants first on the dry land. That way the dry land didn't erode out down into the water. But they said life probably began in the oceans. Probably means what? If I say we're probably going to the park today, do you get excited or not?
Get excited.
Yeah. That means they think it most likely did, but there's a slight chance it didn't. How would they know that? Then they tell us it has everything that living things need, hydrogen and nitrogen and things. Have a look at this. They say lightning bolts cause chemical reactions. These form simple chemicals that wash into the oceans where they reacted with others to form more complex molecules. Some of these molecules developed an ability to copy themselves. You would think they were watching, wouldn't you? You'd think one of the scientists went back in time and said, let's see what happens, and watch and watch and watch, and then they saw this happen. If you talk to a real scientist who studies life, and you say, here's what I think. I'm going to do an experiment with some lightning stuff and some chemicals, and then I'm going to watch long enough for those molecules that form to develop the ability to copy themselves. Do you know what that scientist would do?
No.
They would fall on the floor laughing so hard, roll around, and they would say, you are crazy. Because it can't happen. The idea that a molecule could just come together with lightning and be able to make a copy just like itself is crazy. But they say it right here, just as if they saw it happen, don't they?
Yes.
Now, this book was extra interesting. I had never seen this before. They actually have an artist with computer generated thing as if it had an early cell, a very simple cell, like doesn't exist anywhere on Earth, with a very simple bubble, they call it, to keep everything from washing away so it could start collecting. I couldn't believe how sure they were and how much they wanted to convince children that these early cells could just get started with the smallest amount that you would need to get a cell started. There is nothing on Earth like what they have here. And yet they have a computer-generated model that makes you think that they just took out their microscope and took a picture of it. That's how confident they are and how much they want it to look like facts. Okay, here is why earlier they said that life probably began in the oceans. They also are telling you about the idea some scientists have that life started in outer space and came down on a meteorite. If life is impossible and crazy to think of starting all by itself here on Earth, is it any easier for it to start out in space or on another planet?
No.
No, it's just as impossible. All they're doing is pushing back how much time they have, as if time was a kind of magic that you can just wave it around, and if you give it enough time, anything is possible. Is that true?
No.
If I give your room enough time, will it be clean all by itself without you helping it?
No.
No. I could give it 1,000,000 years, and if nobody went into your room would be just as messy. And it would be messier because things would have fallen apart. All right. Then it has lots of wonderful pages that are just as confident, except they're talking about things that we can actually see. Then they have a section on evolution. Now, I thought it was interesting. They have a display where they have a very interesting looking animal that they say was starting to turn into an elephant. It looks sort of like a hippopotamus body with a bit of a long nose, kind of like a tapir. And then they have one of the extinct elephants that had almost tusks on its lower lip, but they have it saying, I could be an elephant one day. It was a real animal. It was not turning into an elephant. It was itself an elephant cousin, just as if they saw it. And here's what they have to say about it. The reason why there are so many species is evolution. Evolution is a process of change that happens gradually over millions of years. Tiny alterations in the way an organism looks or behaves may give it an edge over other members of its species and an ability to survive. Some new features are adapted and passed down through succeeding generations until the descendant looks or behaves differently from its ancestor. That's a new species. Do you know what?
What?
That's true. If you go to the Ark Encounter, they have some very interesting models of animals that we don't see animals just like that today, because we know that, like the cats, God probably only brought one daddy cat and one mommy cat to Noah. And when they got off the ark, they had lots and lots of children, and some of them turned into tigers and some of them turned into mountain lions. Oh, and there would have been saber-toothed tigers that we don't have anymore. Over hundreds of years, they started changing so much that they became what we now call as scientists species. But does that get you from a little bitty mouse-like thing to an elephant?
No.
No, it can't. I was reading about this idea in Creation Ministries International's book, Evolution's Achilles Heels, and Donald Patton, who has a PhD, he had a great analogy. So I made a picture of it, and I'll post that in the show notes as well. Here's what he said. The changes that we see in animals are very much like saying, because a cow can jump over a fence, it is only a matter of time and practice for it to jump over the moon. Do you know what that means?
No.
The evolutionists see some change. They see animals that used to be dark brown. Now some of their children and grandchildren have spots or lighter color. And they say, well, if you just kept doing that for thousands and then millions of years, eventually that animal will turn into a brand new animal, because what they see is little changes. They'll see the beak on a bird where the parent birds have ordinary beaks. And then the children will have, see here in this book, they show it right there. This beak on the bird is thin and long. This beak is a little thicker and shorter. And they'll say, well, all you have to do is have the bird keep changing, and eventually it'll turn into and they never tell you. They'll tell you what it has turned into, but they won't tell you what it is turning into. So, but into a whole new bird that can do different things. But that's just like saying cows can jump over fences. So all you have to do is let it practice and let it try long enough, and eventually it's going to jump over the moon. Or they'll say it already did jump over the moon, is what they say with evolution. Does that make any sense?
No.
No, that's crazy thinking. And yet, you know what? I have run into people who, when I tell them that, they say that is ridiculous. That to say that evolution ever stops, that you can only go so far. Yes, cows can jump, but they can never jump up high enough to get anywhere close to the moon. They say that I'm the one who's unscientific.
What?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Now this one, I wanted to show you one more section. They have a timeline where they say this is where the earth began and here is where we are now. And they have lots of pictures showing what happened. You've got the earth starting, and then you have the first life, and then you have complex cells, and it gets more and more complicated, and things start living on the dry land instead of in the ocean. Do you know they have some things on Earth that they're basing this whole idea of? Do you know what they're looking at to say this is what happened first and then this is what happened later?
No.
They are looking at the fossils. When you look at the fossils and you dig way, way down deep, the first rocks we find have nothing alive in them at all. Then they find rocks with little tiny bacteria and other things, that single cell creatures fossilized. And then they start finding algae. And then they start finding some things that could live on Earth. And then they start finding whole bunches of sea creatures. And finally they start finding reptiles and then mammals and things. And at the very top, you start finding things like monkeys and people. That's true. It really is like that. The deep stuff and the middle stuff and then the top. But does that mean this is from billions of years ago and this is from 155 million years ago, like it says? Does it have to mean that?
No.
What else could it mean? What else could cause only the cells, simple cells, to be at the very bottom and then lots of things that live in the ocean next?
A flood.
A flood. Now, it's going to take us a long time in our podcast to get up to the flood because we're going through everything. But eventually we're going to get to the flood. And that's exactly right. You look at what's happened, like there's a coelacanth, which is a fish that they first found, scientists first saw in the fossil record. And for a long time, they thought it had died out 85 million years ago until a fisherman pulled one out. But now we know those fish live way down deep. Then our nautiluses that we like so much, we know they go way back in the fossil record. They live way down deep during the day, and then they come up near the surface at night. That's how we found out about them, besides the fossils. The flood buried the stuff at the bottom of the ocean first. Then it buried stuff that lived in the ocean. And finally, it started burying stuff that lived near the coast, and then further in from the coast, until finally even the biggest dinosaur and the fastest runners were getting buried. They have their idea, and they need lots of millions of years to have their evolution come true. We know what God tells us is the truth, and we know that a flood can bury a lot of rocks really fast if it's covering the whole earth. So, the rest of this book was pretty much what we can see everywhere. I love these pictures of microscopes where it showed, what were these?
Butterfly wings.
The scales on a butterfly's wings. And this was, do you remember?
I forgot.
A grain of pollen. We actually have a squishy ball that has these bumps all over it in nice round circles. And when I looked at the pollen, it's like, that looks almost exactly like our squishy ball, doesn't it?
Yes.
So we have a giant pollen grain to play with, except if you look at the pollen grain, it's way more complicated. See those little holes in it? And of course, it has all the instructions to make a brand new plant. It's way, way more complicated than our ball is. And different things. So it was a really fun book. That's why I let him borrow it from the library. But then they have these other things in there where they say, this is the way it was when they weren't there.
The pollen has more
Bumps?
than our squishy ball.
Right. It was much more complicated when God makes things. And the more we study, Like if Darwin and the others had come up with their idea of evolution today, and everybody had known there was a creator until today when you were born, and then somebody came in and said, oh, I think this just sloshed together all by itself. You know what would happen? Everybody who studies science would just laugh. They would say, books, there's DNA, there are huge, there's a library of books inside of every cell. There's all kinds of things to stop animals and cells from changing too much. They can change a little, but not very much. You can have big roses and little roses, big dogs and little dogs, but you will never, ever get one of them to turn into something brand new. They would just be laughed at. But now, because so many, they don't even want to think about God. They put their fingers in their ears and they cover their eyes and they say, la, 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 la. We don't see any God. We don't see any creator. That's why they have things like this. And they want you children to think that they know the truth instead of listening to the Bible and what God told us. You know what? We're going to wrap up. We're going to pray. Dear Jesus, we thank you that you are real, that you are the creator, and we can trust you, and that you love us. You love us so much you decided to make us and the whole amazing world and universe. We thank you for giving us your Bible where we can find out the truth and that we can learn. Thank you for leaving lots of stuff for us to explore, that you let us figure out microscopes, that you let us figure out all these things that scientists get to work on, and we still have so much more to learn. We praise you and we honor you as our true and real creator, and we pray that you would help us to serve you and love you our whole lives. Amen.
Amen.
Well, that finishes up our show for today. Again, please visit the show notes, creationscience4kids.com/library book to find out more. And be sure to let me know what you think. You can go to creationscience4kids.com/podcast. I have a contact form right there. Well, this finishes up our show for today. Until next time, have fun treasuring our amazing universe and creator. Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Revelation 4:11.